My son-in-law secretly ordered a DNA test on my daughter and announced the results at a family dinner. He stood up, tapped his glass, and said, "Robert isn't her real father." My daughter froze. My wife dropped her fork. And in that moment, 40 years of my life were put on trial. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. I remember the exact sound the room made when he said it. It wasn't silence. It was something heavier, like the air itself had thickened. I sat there staring at Tyler, my daughter's husband of barely 2 years, holding a folded sheet of paper like it was some kind of holy scripture. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look unsure. He looked prepared, like he had rehearsed this moment in the mirror. My daughter Claire whispered my name under her breath, but her voice cracked halfway through. She looked at me the way a child looks at a parent when the world suddenly stops making sense. My wife, Linda, covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide, her breathing shallow. And all I could think was, why now? Why here? Why like this? Tyler cleared his throat and said, "I thought the family deserved the truth." He said it like he was doing everyone a favor, like he was the hero in this story. He unfolded the paper slowly, theatrically, as if he wanted every second to burn into our memories. I could feel the eyes of my relatives on me, cousins, uncles, nieces, people who had known me my entire life, people who had trusted me, respected me, people who were now wondering if everything they knew about me was a lie. I didn't say a word, not because I was guilty, but because I was stunned that someone would go this far, that someone would violate my daughter's privacy, my family's dignity, and my own identity just to make a point I didn't even understand yet. He read a line from the paper, something about non-paternity probability, and I watched Claire's face crumble. She reached for the paper, but he pulled it back, shaking his head like she was a child reaching for a knife. "Not yet," he said. "Let me finish." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not anger, not fear, something colder, something older, something that had been sleeping for decades. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back without breaking eye contact with him. "Where did you get that test?" I asked. My voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. He smirked. "It doesn't matter. What matters is the result." Claire finally found her voice. "Tyler, why would you do this? Why would you test me without asking, without telling me?" Her voice trembled, but there was steel underneath it. She wasn't just hurt. She was betrayed. He shrugged. "I had my reasons." I stepped closer to him. "What reasons?" He folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "We'll talk later. This is a family matter." I laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "I am the family matter." He didn't like that. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. And for the first time, I saw something in him I had never seen before. Not insecurity, not fear, but calculation. He wasn't just trying to embarrass me. He was trying to remove me. The dinner ended in chaos. Claire ran upstairs. Linda followed her. Relatives whispered. Some avoided my eyes. Some stared too long. Tyler walked out like he had just delivered a sermon, not detonated a bomb. When the house finally emptied, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the empty plates, the half-finished meals, the wine glasses still trembling from the shock. I felt like a stranger in my own home, like someone had taken a knife and carved a crack straight through the center of my life. Linda came back downstairs, her eyes red. She sat beside me and took my hand. "Robert, what if he's right?" I didn't answer, not because I doubted myself, but because I knew doubt spreads like poison, and Tyler had just injected it into the heart of my family. The next morning, I found an envelope on my porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a copy of the DNA report, and a handwritten note that said, "You should step aside before things get worse." I stared at that note for a long time. The handwriting wasn't Tyler's, it was Claire's. My heart sank, not because she believed him, but because she was scared. scared enough to write something she didn't mean, scared enough to think that stepping aside was the only way to keep the peace. I walked into the kitchen and found Tyler sitting at my table, drinking my coffee, reading my newspaper like he owned the place. He didn't even look up when I entered. "You're early," he said. "This is my house," I replied. He folded the newspaper and finally met my eyes. "Not for long." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "What does that mean?" He leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. "If Claire isn't biologically yours, then legally you have no claim to this property. No inheritance rights, no authority, and no say in anything that involves her." I stared at him, trying to understand the depth of his audacity. "You think you can erase me with a piece of paper?" He smiled. "I don't need to erase you. I just need to prove you don't belong." I stepped closer. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't blink. "Because you're in my way." Those 5 words hit harder than the DNA test, harder than the public humiliation, harder than the doubt he had planted in my family. In his way. In his way of what? Money? Property? Control? Something darker? I didn't know yet. But I knew one thing. This wasn't about biology. This wasn't about truth. This was about power. And he had just declared war. I walked out of the kitchen without another word, not because I was defeated, but because I needed to think. I needed to understand what he wanted, and I needed to figure out how far he was willing to go. That night, I heard Claire crying in her room. I stood outside her door, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that I was her father, no matter what any test said, that nothing could change the years we had shared, the memories we had built, the love we had lived. But I didn't open the door, because I knew Tyler was listening, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I went to my study, opened the bottom drawer of my desk, and pulled out a small wooden box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents, letters, photographs, pieces of a past I had buried long before Claire was born. I stared at them, feeling the weight of old secrets pressing against my chest. If Tyler wanted a war, he was about to get one, but he had no idea what kind of man he was dealing with. And as I sat there in the dim light of my study, listening to the quiet hum of the house, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Tyler wasn't trying to prove I wasn't Claire's father. He was trying to prove he was the only one she needed, and that meant he wasn't just coming for me. He was coming for her, and I wasn't going to let that happen. Not now. Not ever. Those words echoed in my mind long after the house went quiet. I sat alone in my study, the wooden box open in front of me, old papers spread across the desk like ghosts I had tried to forget. The lamp cast a soft yellow glow, and for a moment I felt like I was staring at the ruins of 2 different lives, one I had lived and one I had buried. I didn't want to open those doors again, but Tyler had forced my hand. He had crossed a line he didn't even understand existed. I picked up a photograph from the box. It was faded, the edges curled, the colors washed out by time. A younger version of me stood beside a woman who wasn't Linda. Her name was Margaret, a name I hadn't spoken in decades, a name I had promised myself I would never speak again. She was smiling in the picture, her hand resting on her stomach. I remembered the day it was taken. I remembered the fear, the uncertainty, the decision that changed everything. I put the photo down and closed my eyes. I could hear Claire crying upstairs. I could hear Tyler pacing in the hallway, talking on the phone in a low voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Confident, controlled, like a man who believed he had already won. He didn't know me. He didn't know what I was capable of when pushed, and he certainly didn't know the truth behind the one thing he thought he had uncovered. I opened my eyes and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to let him tear my family apart. Not with lies, not with half-truths, not with a test he didn't even understand. But I also knew I couldn't confront him without a plan. He was too calculated, too prepared. He had something bigger in mind, something that went beyond humiliating me at dinner. I needed to know what he wanted. The next morning, I drove to the clinic listed on the DNA report. It was a small building on the edge of town, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. The receptionist looked up as I entered, her smile polite but tired. "Can I help you?" I handed her the report. "I need to know who requested this test." She glanced at it, then shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't release that information without authorization." I leaned in slightly. "I'm not asking for medical records. I'm asking who submitted my daughter's sample without her consent." She hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the report again. "This wasn't submitted as a patient test." "What does that mean?" "It was submitted as part of a property verification case." I felt my stomach tighten. "Property?" She nodded. "Sometimes people use DNA tests to establish inheritance rights, land disputes, estate claims, that sort of thing." I stepped back, the room suddenly colder. Tyler wasn't just trying to embarrass me. He wasn't trying to prove anything about Claire. He was building a legal case, a case that required removing me from the picture entirely. I thanked her and walked out, my mind racing. Property verification, inheritance rights, land disputes. He was trying to take my home, my land, the ranch I had built with my own hands, the place where Claire had taken her first steps, the place where Linda and I had spent our entire marriage. He wanted it, and he was willing to destroy my family to get it. When I got home, Tyler was in the backyard, measuring the fence line with a tape measure and a clipboard. He didn't even look up when I approached. "You're trespassing," he said casually. I stared at him. "This is my property. For now." I felt something inside me snap. "What are you doing, Tyler?" He finally looked at me, his expression cold. "I'm preparing for the transition." "What transition?" "The one where Claire and I take over the estate." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can just take my home because of a DNA test?" He shrugged. "The law is the law." "No," I said quietly. "This isn't about the law. This is about you wanting control." He didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. "Claire deserves stability. She deserves a future, and she deserves a husband who can provide it. And you think taking my home will give her that?" "I think removing you will." I stepped closer, my voice low. "You're not just coming after me. You're coming after her." He smirked. "She'll understand eventually." I shook my head. "No, she won't." He leaned in slightly. "You're old, Robert. You're tired. You've had your time. Let the next generation take over." I stared at him, realizing something I hadn't seen before. He didn't love Claire. He didn't care about her. She was a means to an end, a key to a door he couldn't open on his own, and I was the lock he needed to break. I walked away before I did something I would regret, but every step felt heavier than the last. I needed to protect Claire. I needed to protect my home, and I needed to protect the truth I had buried for decades. That night, I found Claire sitting on the porch, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes red from crying. She didn't look up when I sat beside her. For a long time we didn't speak. The air was cool, the sky clear, the stars bright. It should have been peaceful, but it wasn't. "Dad," she whispered finally, "is it true?" I closed my eyes. "Do you think it's true?" She hesitated. "I don't know what to think." I nodded slowly. "Then let me tell you what matters. I raised you. I held you when you were born. I taught you to ride a bike. I stayed up with you when you were sick. I walked you into your first day of school. I watched you grow into the woman you are. That's what makes me your father." She wiped her eyes. "But the test. Tests don't define families," I said softly. "People do." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment I felt like everything might be okay. But then she whispered something that made my blood run cold. "Tyler said, if you fight this, he'll take me away." I felt my jaw tighten. "He said that?" She nodded. "He said he has proof. He said he has a plan. He said you're dangerous." I turned to her, stunned. "Dangerous?" She nodded again, her voice trembling. He said you're hiding something. I looked out at the dark yard, the fence line barely visible in the moonlight. Tyler wasn't just trying to take my home. He was trying to turn my own daughter against me, and he was using a truth I had buried long ago as a weapon. I stood up slowly. Claire, listen to me. Whatever he told you, whatever he thinks he knows, he's wrong. She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. Then tell me the truth. I opened my mouth, then closed it. The truth was complicated, messy, painful, and once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. But Tyler had left me no choice. I took a deep breath. There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago. She stood up, her face pale. Dad, what is it? I looked at her, my heart heavy. And then I heard footsteps behind us. Slow, deliberate. Tyler stepped onto the porch, his arms crossed, his expression smug. Go on, Robert, he said softly. Tell her. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He already knew, and he was waiting for me to say it, waiting to use it, waiting to finish what he had started, waiting to destroy me completely. I didn't turn toward him right away. I kept my eyes on Claire because she was the only thing that mattered in that moment. Her face was pale, her hands trembling, her breath shallow. She looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see which way the ground would break. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to shield her. But Tyler's presence behind us felt like a shadow stretching across the porch, swallowing the air. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, like a man savoring the final act of a performance he had been directing from the start. Go on, Robert, he said softly. Tell her what you've been hiding. Claire looked between us, her eyes wide. Dad, what is he talking about? I finally turned to face him. He stood with his arms crossed, his chin slightly raised, his expression smug. He thought he had cornered me. He thought he had the truth in his hands. But he didn't know the whole story. He didn't know the cost of the truth. He didn't know what it meant to carry a secret for decades. Not to protect yourself, but to protect the people you love. I took a slow breath. Claire, before you were born, there was someone else in my life, someone I cared about, someone who didn't stay. Tyler smirked. Her name was Margaret. Claire's eyes widened. Dad? I ignored him. It was a long time ago, before I met your mother, before I knew what kind of man I wanted to be. Margaret and I, we weren't right for each other. We fought. We drifted. And when she left, she told me she was pregnant. Claire covered her mouth. Pregnant? I nodded. I tried to find her. I tried to help. But she disappeared. No address. No phone. Nothing. I didn't know if the child was mine. I didn't know if she was lying. I didn't know anything. Tyler stepped forward. But you knew enough to hide it. I looked at him sharply. I hid nothing. I had nothing to hide. I didn't even know if the child existed. He tilted his head. But you never told Claire. I turned back to her. Because it had nothing to do with you. Because it was a ghost from a life I left behind. Because when you were born, Claire, you were my world. You were my beginning. You were the only thing that mattered. She blinked, tears forming. So, what does this have to do with me? Tyler stepped between us like he owned the space. Everything. Because the DNA test shows you're not his biological daughter. Claire staggered back as if he had slapped her. What? I felt my chest tighten. Claire. Tyler held up a hand. Save it. The test is clear. And if she's not your biological daughter, then legally, you have no claim to this property. No inheritance rights, no authority, and no say in anything involving her. I stepped closer, my voice low. You think biology defines family? He smiled. The law does. Claire shook her head, tears streaming. Tyler, why would you do this? Why would you test me without asking? Why would you... He cut her off. Because I needed to know what I was marrying into. I stared at him. No, you needed to know what you could take. He didn't deny it. Claire backed away from him. You did this for the house? He shrugged. For our future. She stared at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You used me. He stepped toward her. I protected you. She stepped back. From what? He pointed at me. From him. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What exactly do you think you're protecting her from? He didn't blink. From a man who built his life on lies. Claire shook her head. Tyler. Stop. But he didn't. He turned to me, his voice rising. You lied about your past. You lied about who you were. You lied about your family. And you lied to her. I stepped forward. I never lied to her. He smirked. You lied by omission. I clenched my jaw. That's not the same. He leaned in. It is in court. Claire gasped. Court? Tyler? What are you talking about? He turned to her, his voice suddenly soft, almost gentle. Sweetheart, I filed a petition this morning. She froze. A petition for what? He looked at me as he said it. To remove him from the property. Claire's knees buckled. She grabbed the railing to steady herself. You filed legal papers? Against my father? He nodded. It's the only way to protect our future. I stepped closer, my voice low and steady. You're not protecting her. You're isolating her. He didn't flinch. I'm securing what's rightfully ours. Claire shook her head violently. No, Tyler, this is wrong. This is insane. He reached for her arm. You'll understand when you calm down. She pulled away. Don't touch me. His expression darkened. Claire, I stepped between them. You need to leave. He laughed. This is my home. I stared at him. Not yet. He leaned in, his voice a whisper. It will be. I didn't move. Leave. He looked at Claire. Are you really choosing him over your husband? She wiped her tears. I'm choosing the truth. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked inside, slamming the door behind him. Claire collapsed onto the porch steps, sobbing. I sat beside her, placing a hand on her back. She leaned into me, shaking. Dad, what do we do? I looked out into the dark yard, the fence line barely visible in the moonlight. Tyler had declared war, but he had made one fatal mistake. He thought the DNA test was the truth. He didn't know the real truth. I took a deep breath. Claire, there's something else you need to know. She looked up, her eyes swollen. What? I hesitated, not because I doubted her, but because I knew what this truth would do. It would break something, but it would also save something. I exhaled slowly. When you were born, your mother and I had been trying for years. We went through treatments, procedures, losses, and when nothing worked, we made a decision. She stared at me, confused. What decision? I swallowed hard. We used a donor. Her breath caught. A donor? I nodded. You were always ours. Always. But biologically, you were conceived with help. She covered her mouth. Mom never told me. She wanted to. We both did. But every time we tried, you were too young, or too scared, or too happy. And then life kept moving, and we kept waiting for the right moment, and it never came. She sobbed into her hands. So the test? It wasn't wrong. No, I said softly. It wasn't wrong. But it wasn't the truth either. She looked up, tears streaming. What do you mean? I took her hand. The truth is, biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Time does. Sacrifice does. And I have been your father every day of your life. She threw her arms around me, crying into my shoulder. I held her tightly, feeling the weight of decades lift and settle all at once. Then the porch light flickered. We both looked up. Tyler stood inside the house, staring at us through the window. But he wasn't angry. He was smiling, a slow, cold, calculated smile. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. He didn't care about the DNA. He didn't care about the truth. He cared about winning. And he had just realized something. The truth I revealed, the truth that should have saved us, was the same truth he could use to destroy me publicly. He lifted his phone, he pressed record, and he whispered through the glass, Thank you, Robert. You just gave me everything I needed. If this story meant something to you, like the video, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for listening.